Okay, so welcome everybody. Today we are reviewing or going over Intro to Finding Open Materials for Teaching. So the what, the where, the who of open and also open educational resources. So our learning outcomes for today, basically faculty will understand the difference between freely accessible resources, open access, and vetted open educational resources. You'll gain an understanding of open resources available in performing arts and film. So just a few basic, starting points for that, but sort of more of a methodology for finding what you need. You'll be able to evaluate rights and attributions for these resources, and you'll consider how to integrate open resources alongside library provided resources and any assets you may have created yourselves into Canvas. So this kind of mixing bowl of content, if you will. So what are the pros of using open resources? Certainly, there's a whole world, broad world of information out there. And one of the, the big pros of using it is certainly that we broaden our perspective and we integrate new, diverse and topical content into our classes. So particularly if you're following certain content providers, certain channels, you can pick up on sort of the new that's happening as it comes along. But it also allows one to dig into organizations that may be placing their content out there but may not be as well known. And if it allows our students to have a broader exposure to content. We can help our students as well find resources online and teach them about responsible usage and consumption of these online resources. Students don't always think about where the information is coming from. And so if we are, gathering it in a responsible way and presenting it in a responsible way, they'll follow our lead there. If you're using online textbooks, which we will talk about quite a bit in this session, this can actually save students thousands over the course of a degree program. So we see online textbooks mostly available in the realm of, general education, but they are available for other disciplines as well. So what are some of the cons? Well, particularly with, working with open resources, you are dependent on others for the upkeep and the preservation of materials. So if someone decides that they want to retire and take down an entire website that they've built over the last 10 years, they can do that. And pieces that you've already used in your class can go along with them. As well, you have to really deeply consider and review content for continuing relevance to your course. So in working with some resources, you may find that some of it is really good and some of it just really isn't good, and you have to make those decisions for each class. So there are also inherent responsibilities that go along with working with open access. And one of the big jokes with open access is that stuff is free, like a box of free kittens. We know that they're really soft and purry and cute, but it also takes a lot of energy and time and money to deal with free sometimes. So you do have responsibilities. For you, that time would be in the realm of responsible use. You want to make sure that you're finding assets that are verifiable. And when I say verifiable, I mean that they come from critical and attributable sources. You want to make sure that the information you're presenting to your students is accurate, and that also there is some level of permanence to it. So whoever's put it out there is dedicated to keeping it online over time. You'll want to look at rights and usage statements. So most content, and we'll dig around a little bit for it today, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but most open content does have rights and usage guidelines that can tell you how you can best use it in your class, if you need to make changes, and gives you a lot of different kinds of information about use. You can also make sure to include attributions and credits to content that you're using as well. And you want to make sure that each semester you really are reviewing and refreshing your Canvas pages to, make sure that content hasn't come down that was previously up. So I do see this in supporting faculty semester after semester, where perhaps you haven't taught the class in a year and suddenly content, either URLs have changed or, the content's gone. So this does happen, and it really is on you as the faculty member to make sure that the content, is still available or replaced. So there are two terms that are commonly used with open content, and particularly with what we call OER, or open educational resources, and that's adoption versus adaption. Most of the time, you're just simply adopting content. You're finding it, and then you're pulling it into your class in some sort of capacity, and you're using it in its current form. But some open content that's created is put out there so that you can make changes. You can adapt to make sure that it works best for your class and your teaching needs. And that's where things get really kind of cool and interesting, I think. There are a lot of types of open content. The first type that we'll look at today is what I call freely available, and that's not a very professional term for it. It's just more a term of use. But this is just anything you might find on the internet. So somebody's made it and they've put it out there. It could be on YouTube, it could be any number of places, but it's something that you can grab and then take a URL and put it on your Canvas page. In addition to that, there are resources that are deemed open access. And open access means that it has been vetted through an authoritative source, such as a performing arts organization, a nonprofit collective, an educational institution. We were talking a little earlier about the Internet Archive as certainly one of those sources. And it has been put up there for consumption to be open. Typically with that kind of content, we see a collection of videos or an image database or types of media content that you can go in and find a single object out of that bank of content. Perhaps it feels like a museum or library archives or film archives, and you're just selecting singular pieces. You're grabbing it and then you're placing it on your Canvas for your students to look at. With open educational resources, things get a little more complex. Typically, these are teaching objects, textbooks, and course frameworks that have been created by faculty teams. So individual faculty or a number of faculty who come together and have deep subject level knowledge. So they're essentially creating their own textbooks is what this sort of boils down to. And this can happen, again, at the level of a singular teaching object, perhaps a video on a certain theme. It can involve, again, creating these more traditional textbooks, but it can also include things like quizzes and teacher, teaching background information and all of these types of pieces that help us hook into our student learning outcomes and the goals of the class. Typically, open educational resources have a little bit more of a tie-in to the curriculum of the class and of the way the class is framed out. Again, these kinds of resources are great in supporting what we call textbook affordability for students. Let's see, I'm letting one more person in. There we go. Clifton just joined us. Okay, so the first type of open resources that we're going to talk about today are those resources that I call freely available. And again, not, not a terribly professional term for it, but it's just all the sort of stuff that's out there. And so I wanted to talk today, and we'll do some what I call live exercises. I'll switch over to Chrome and we'll cruise around a little bit. But we're going to look at some examples from both Googling and also YouTube. What I tend to do to find particularly video or images is that I use Google and then I click on the tab according to the media type. But one can also, of course, go to a site like YouTube or go to a site that has images or sound files and search in that way. Know that if you're using a resource that's open to Google, you're searching through Google's searching algorithms versus those that might be sitting on their site. So you might get different sets of results according to what site you're sitting on. And there could be lots of value added pieces by searching both, sort of toggling back and forth, in your search. Remember that in YouTube, companies, artists, and theaters often maintain channels. So making sure that you subscribe to your favorite ones and particularly if you are studying a specific company or specific group, it could be really great in that you'll know what the new content is as soon as it comes out. So I definitely recommend subscribing both to those channels on YouTube, but also if you're following social media. I typically use Instagram and Facebook, a little bit of Twitter, just to sort of see what kinds of new content is coming out. Make sure when you're in any of these sites, again, that are freely available, people are just pushing it out, that you're checking your videos for speed, editing, and length. So I tell you this because speed of the video is like one of the top ways to evade the copyright police. So if you have a film that you really don't have the rights to place on YouTube and you put it up and you speed your film up slightly or crank it back down, you can get around, copyright a bit. So just to make sure you watch out for that, one way that I check actually is I just go into Wikipedia, and if it's a studio film, typically I'll be able to find the runtime of that film. And I can compare it against what the video time is in Wikipedia. I've seen a lot of this over the past few years in working with school filmmaking, so it is out there. Editing, of course, is a big issue too. So sometimes you'll see a film that's been recorded, it's a recording of something that's already there and it's zoomed in on certain pieces. So again, just be very careful about what you're looking at when using YouTube. And again, too, you'll want to check for any rights statements, which can be hard to decipher. And I'll show you an example of that being hard in just a moment. So I am going to move over to, there we go. I've got to go over to my next screen, and this is not going smoothly, so I apologize. Get there. I always think that I have things queued up and then I don't have things queued up that well. So my apologies. Okay. So I think you should be able to see this channel here, or my search. Let me see if I can get this to. There. Perfect. So I've had quite a few faculty recently looking for content on Bill T. Jones. So I thought that was a great search to run today. And so if one were looking for videos on Bill T. Jones, you could, of course, use just simply Google, which is what I did. I just typed in his name and I clicked on the link for videos. Now, this is going to bring me quite a bit of YouTube. We can see that that's front and center. But there are a lot of other videos that are mixed in as well. So pieces coming from, dancemagazine.com and other related channels. And some of these, some of these sites may also be using YouTube as a streaming platform. So the content might be there. It's just that it's coming through and described on a different site. Now, something to think about when you are looking through this content, all of this actually looks really good to me in terms of the providers. We see here that the first one's coming to us from the Kennedy Center. There's another from Kennedy Center. There are a few others. This one was uploaded by Google, so this may be through their arts and culture site, Project Humanities, New York Live Arts, that's an organization that he's aligned with. So there's quite a bit of you know, what I would call vetted content, or, you know, sort of real providers that are providing us content here. And if we keep going, you know, if we search to the next page, we'll see that continue. So that's one way, Mellon Foundation, TED, you know, that's one really great way to sort of jump in and best understand where things are coming from. Now, another place we can go, of course, is just straight into YouTube. And so if I click on any of these videos coming from YouTube, I'm just going to do that up here really quickly, straight into his channel. And my apologies for any sound that goes on. There we go, I got it. So if we go straight to his channel, we see that we can, of course, subscribe. This is coming through New York Live Arts, which is another place that we can subscribe to. And we'll see all of the different kinds of content that's available here. If there are rights statements around this, it's typically going to show up either here, kind of on the front page and the home page, or it will be under the About statement as well. So unfortunately, there isn't really content here about usage. Typically, there is at least a few lines that say, you know, this is available for this use or not this use, or if for rights, contact these people. But if you are digging in looking for that, this is a, you know, a great place to get started. So another site that I'm going to show you is this that I found earlier. And this is one of those film sites that I want to point out has great content, but I'm bringing you here because I have no idea who has put this site up. So it's a really great, fun place to come. It has films like Plan 9 from Outer Space and some of these like really classic films, but it's being placed up by a site called Timeless Classic Movies. Now, there are some, I've looked in here, I've dug around a little bit, I have found some connections to Turner Classic Movies, but I'm not really sure this is coming from TCM. This really is a little dubious. Now, one thing that I can do in terms of analyzing this is that it has been up for 7 years. So I feel like if there were copyright issues, they would have probably gotten a cease and desist by now and the content would be down. I also did go into Wikipedia earlier to see if this had a similar runtime, and it does. It has about an 80-minute runtime, so we're about right at an hour and 18 minutes here. So it hasn't been terribly slowed down. You know, this is one of those sites, once again, and I think the quality is okay on this, where one could come and grab these films and put it into your Canvas page. We even are able to embed by using YouTube and Canvas. But again, because you don't know who the source is, it's not really tied to any sort of nonprofit or a vetted organization. This could be here today and gone tomorrow. So you do have to be very careful about using sites like this, even though it seems really fun and like there might be some great content here. I can tell you that 1959 does not place this film in the public domain. This is not something that's freely available. So again, I'm not sure, you know, under what rights this is here. If we click on the About, we don't really get a lot of information. So we don't really know who's put this out, why, or how. Okay, so just checking to see if we have any questions, and it doesn't seem like we do, so we'll move on to the next slide. I'm going to go back into my share. Now it'll let me go back to my, all right. So next, we have what's deemed as open access. So these are resources that are typically placed online with the rights that are cleared. There should be fairly strong statements about rights or content that's in the public domain. These kinds of projects are authoritative, they're curated, or they're authored. So this means that there is some sort of, again, team of scholars, practitioners, creative communities. There could be librarians, archivists behind this that understand the subject content, have placed it together for a reason, have done great work on the metadata and the description of this content, and they've placed it out there for consumption in an educational or just an open context. So it could be education, could be entertainment. Access to these materials, and one of the big reasons that open access is so big these days is that access to these materials really does help with equitable access to learning. So in creating these kinds of big databases and these banks of content, one can sort of put it out there and then allow it to be used, across the globe. And so, in doing that, practitioners and faculty are able to grab onto facets of content and types of content and integrate it into their own teaching. But learners who are curious have so much at their fingertips now. It's just absolutely incredible. So notable open access examples are, and I'm going to run through a few projects. We were talking earlier about the Internet Archive, which of course is a site that has the Wayback Machine. I'd forgotten all about that one. That's one of its funnest aspects, I think, where it's actually archiving the internet and websites. But it also has a massive amount of film and also text-based works, so journals, books, and all kinds of content. The Internet Archive actually stood up, I think it was called the Free Library in the early days of the COVID shutdown, where they made just thousands and thousands, and it may even have been in the millions of ebooks available. Unfortunately, that has been shut down due to copyright issues, so it probably won't be here for us this fall, but it was a great help in getting through those kind of early days where we were all sort of jumping online quickly. I'm going to come back to this, but the Hottie Trust is another large grouping of ebooks. And I find over and over again that faculty do not know about Hottie Trust. So I really want to review that with you today. It's essentially the nonprofit side or front and interface for the content contained and created by the Google Books project. So it's millions and millions of scanned books and OCR texts that exist in one database. It's really phenomenal. There's the Digital Public Library of America, or the DPLA, and Europeana, both of which are sort of aggregators. They pull together content from all kinds of different sites, and you can seamlessly search into all these different open access repositories at the same time. Typically, you'll find images, text, and other kinds of content available in these. Primary source, both of those are fantastic for primary source content. So particularly if you are in an online environment and having students do research this semester, you can send them to those kinds of sites to do research on primary sources. Project Gutenberg is one of the very earliest ebook, if not the earliest ebook project. It was stood up, I think, in the, I want to say the late 70s as a text-based project. But it has an incredible amount of public domain, full text ebooks at this point, and they're very, very basic. There are no bells and whistles with Project Gutenberg, but the text is there. PubMed, of course, is one we all know, and a lot of us are looking at these days for information on COVID and other health pieces that are going on. And I just wanted to include this one, IMSLP, which is the Internet Music Score Library, and I can't remember all my acronyms, project maybe. But this holds hundreds of thousands of public domain, freely accessible music scores. And yes, I'm seeing, I had no idea about Hottie. Well, you're going to have an idea about it now, because that's what I think we're going to do that next. Let's see. Nope. Okay. Let me share my screen back to screen share. There we go. Going back to Hottie. Okay. So Hottie Trust, again, is a publicly accessible web interface. Now, this is sitting behind this is many, many large university libraries who went through Google Books to contribute texts that were fully both digitized and they had OCR performed on the texts. So the really awesome thing about Hottie Trust is if you are doing research on super obscure topics, this is the place for you because it's going to search into millions and millions and millions of books at once. One example I use is that we had, when I was at Ohio State, we had a project every single year. So it was once a year where students were researching kinetic art. And it was really, really hard to find specific names of artists who worked with kinetic art. But because this database searched into all of these different exhibition catalogs, we could find names of people. And then from there, because we had the names of the artists, we could go out and do the research and find more information on these artists and what they had done. So those are the kinds of breadcrumbs and the kinds of research you can do within Hottie Trust. For our purposes as well, they provide fully scanned ebooks. So for things that are in the public domain, we have access to some of that content. Much of the content is kept behind firewalls and only accessible to the libraries that actually scan the books. And that, again, that has to do with public domain. Typically, public domain is defined as, the year is 1926. So anything occurring before 26 is considered to be a bit more accessible in terms of copyright. So when we come to Hottie Trust, again, we are searching not only for types of content or information about the content, but we're also searching into the content itself. So today I was trying to have examples from a lot of different schools. We're going to look at music scores. And when I search here, I want to make sure that I click on full text and that is available to me. And then I just simply click on Hottie Trust. When we get here, we're going to want to filter because otherwise we're going to have to field through 800,000 results, which we don't want to do. So if we go down to the left-hand side, we see that we have a number of filters available to us. Date is typically something that I use quite a bit. That really helps me, but also original format. So for this case, we really do want to make sure that we get to musical scores, and I'm going to click on that format to filter down. And we see that immediately we're seeing original scores for Schubert, for Mendelssohn, and a number of other composers. So roughly we have found about 35,000 full text scores. Now we may or may not have access to all of these, but we do have, if it says, and we have a link for full view, we will be able to pull it up. So I'm going to click here and look at that full view. And it's a very, very easy reader. So one can simply, turn the pages by using the slider at the bottom. Over here, we do see a rights statement. We see that this has clearly been placed in the public domain by the Google project. So if we wanted more information on the rights, we could click there and find that out. We can view the full catalog record if we want to find out more information about it. And we can also download. So for many of these materials, information is available to download by the page or perhaps even the whole book. Sometimes the whole book for us, but mainly the page for us because we're, again, not members of this project. There are a number of other pieces that make this really, really useful. You can click and find this in a library. So if you needed the entire score, you could click out, figure it out, and then just simply place an interlibrary loan request for it as well. So by adding this link, the URL to this, you can simply, grab the URL and then place it in your Canvas page as well. I'm going to click on the catalog record, and I think the URL is here. There you go. We can grab the citation if we want to throw this into a bibliography. But let me see, where are you? URL, maybe it's here. Yeah. There is a static URL to each object, and I believe you can simply use this as well. I'll always go looking for that static URL. Let's see if I can find it. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this today. It's got to be here somewhere. All right, well, my apologies. Typically, I can come right to it. But do try and find, whenever you are in these sites, try and find either permalink or permanent URL to use within Canvas rather than just grabbing this at the top. I think you're okay in Hottie Trust with the link at the top. That said, but that permalink is always going to be the more reliable, you know, in terms of building out anything in Canvas. All right. So let me go back, PowerPoint. Okay, so we talked about Hottie Trust. I'm going to talk about a few, and now we're going to talk about open educational resources. So again, this is kind of our third grouping of content. Open educational resources can be anything from a learning object that's tied to curriculum to a textbook or even a course framework. And these are typically reviewed and peer reviewed. So these kinds of resources really are tied to a curriculum, and you'll see all kinds of contextualization in terms of, you know, student learning outcomes, goals, curriculum, content. It's all tied and kind of woven together as the bigger course. If you're using online textbooks, you'll see teacher tools and all kinds of other content that typically goes along with a textbook. And it can be a really rich experience to either fully adopt these online texts for your students or to adopt these in pieces. You don't have to use everything. You may go into an OpenStax text and find just one chapter you want to have your students read, and you can certainly link to that, but you may also decide to use an entire textbook. So today I'm going to show you these three. We're going to bop around. We're going to look first at Smart History, which is one that I use on a pretty regular basis. We're going to look at the OER Commons to think about looking for OER in different disciplinary areas. And we're going to look at OpenStax, which is a really specific textbook project. So let me go out there. There we go. I'm getting a little faster with this going back and forth stuff. There we are. So first, let's take a look at Smart History. And I'm simply going to come to the site. This is smarthistory.org. The reason I'm bringing you here first is because even though there are certainly classes built around specific areas of focus and disciplinary areas, this one, I think more than others, it's easier to get in and sort of break it out in terms of different pieces and modules. And that's something to really look for in all of these OER projects, is this idea of modularizing the class. We've all used modules in Canvas, but finding content that kind of already comes in these prepackaged modules can be really helpful in building out your own classes and doing that quickly. So we can see that Smart History, of course, mostly is an art history course, but it really does connect to a lot of other disciplines as well. And, you know, and anything that's, you know, visual culture is really, really great. I'm just going to click on one of these. We'll click on Modernisms to go in and look a little bit of their content and to see how it's organized. You can, of course, come in and search for pretty much anything. But they do have areas such as modernism broken out both by specific movements and areas, but also by time frames. So if I go in here, we're going to look at, let's look at Latin American. We can come in and get some of the probably the top rated videos that they have in these areas, the most popular, but we can also click on view all content to see what they have. So these are the movements. But then these are specific videos and learning objects within that. And you can just keep clicking on load more. There's so much content here. It's unbelievable. So when we get in and click on any of these, and I'm going to look at Mexican muralism. And again, I'm just going to click on view all content. We see that we come to an area where we have both videos and essays. We can click on any of these. I'm going to look at Diego. And it opens up a really wonderful page. I honestly, when I'm teaching, use this left navigation more than anything else, because it allows me to see what else is there in the context of this one teaching object. So Smart History is great in that they have all of these videos that are pretty short, like 5-10 minutes at the very most, where they go in and consider a work of art and they really contextualize it in the, there's a historical context, there's the biographical context, as well as the, the figural context and the artistic context. So they also provide images so that you can build out more for your own teaching. And of course, they have specific links. So oftentimes when I'm working with art historical topics, I come in here and I grab a link and I put it up so that the students watch the video, but I may come back over here and open up to see where I may find essays, because this site is very, very rich in essays as well that can be used in lieu of a textbook. So here we have one on Orozco, and these are not long, incredibly long essays. They are pretty digestible, but they're usually, again, if one assigns, 4 or 5 of these essays and 2 or 3 videos to watch, that's about the same as assigning about a chapter out of a textbook. So again, by using a site like this, I can kind of, make up the class as I like it. I can construct all of the different content elements, but I did not have to create the content myself. I'm simply bringing it together. I know that the creators of the content are vetted and authoritative. They are faculty members at other institutions. Their biographies are plainly available on this site. And I can trust the information that's coming through here, as well as Smart History is working with museums, so the images are very fine, very high quality. So moving on, we're going to look next at, OER Commons. OER Commons is a place that has, let's see, is that it? No, that is not it. My apologies. There we go. It is what's called a repository. So you can essentially list or index your OER with OER Commons, but different organizations also create hubs within this as well. We're actually working toward this in the state of North Carolina. We do have one that is available to us already through NC Live. UNC System is looking at creating its own hub as well for a suite of projects it's been working on. But for you can just simply come to the site, oercommons.org, and you can search in by subject. So for all of us, we would go under Arts and Humanities and click on Search. This is going to bring us to a variety of different open educational resources. And again, some of these may be more textbook-based, they may be more object-based, but they are here. You'll see that there are ratings that are available too. This is because they have been systematically, some of them anyway, have been reviewed, and OER Commons does offer you that opportunity. Over here to the side, I'm actually going to keep digging in and click on Performing Arts to see what's more relevant to all of us. And you'll see that there is a mix. We have both higher ed and K-12. So I would drill into the left-hand side to the educational level. And I'm going to choose, let's just do lower division for now. And now we see that we have a lot of different kinds of content. We have textbooks and different sites. It seems like we have a lot here for music. Creating musical sounds may be of interest to some, but also critical listening, dance skills, guitar playing. So again, these are all resources that have been created by faculty at other institutions and made available. Once you click, you go out to a different site. If you click on View Resource, first you get, of course, the description for the resource. This one here is was created, it looks like, at, where's this from? CSU Theater. So I don't know which institution that is. They're at Cleveland State. When we go down below, we see the information here. Let's see. Can you show how to credit or cite the essay data, Cleveland? Okay. So yeah, so the information is here. Now, when we talk about doing the credits, you can do sort of a very quick, citation that basically just has the title, the URL link, authorship if it's available here. So here we have the author, Heather Capra, Lisa Burnt, and then theater students at Cleveland State. We can create a citation from this. I don't think they actually provide that for you here. Let's see if it's there. Nope. But the other piece that's really, really important is actually the attribution information. So this has, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but this has what's called a Creative Commons license. And some of you may have seen this in working with open content out on the web. And again, we're gonna go into more depth with this, but Creative Commons is a means for content providers who are placing content in an open context to give rights guidance to those that come behind them to use the content. So here we have a Creative Commons attribution license, which simply means it's one of the easiest, it's a CC BY license. It means that you have the right to use this, but you do need to attribute this. So if you were going to use this as your course text, you would have to have a statement somewhere in your Canvas page, probably just under the link to this resource that says, hey, this is attributed to these authors, to this school, we understand the license, here's the license information, and this is how we're using it. All right, so OER Commons is a great place to come in and dig around a little bit. Let's see, is it okay to copy and paste or should it be linked? You can, for this kind of license, you can copy and paste if it's, if you're able to do adaption, but you still need to attribute the content back to the person that made it. So basically, you're able to adapt the content. You're able to go in and take content out of this and best adapt it for your class, but you still need to attribute it back to the content creator and give them, give them the credit. All right, so let's take a quick look now at OpenStax. OpenStax is a really cool project. It is very much focused on textbooks. And it's a much more sort of traditional OER because what they've done is to create these peer-reviewed, openly licensed, free textbooks that are available both online and for a small cost to be published. Now, these are mainly, I have to say, for general education. They really do cover things. You can see here, like, algebra, calculus, and pieces like that. But there are quite a few as well available in humanities, or a few anyway. And this allows one as well, if you are, let's go into US history. You can simply come here, take a look at the table of contents, and this is where we can come in and we can decide to adopt this entire text for our American history course, but we can also just use chapters. So if there's a particularly good chapter here that we think really covers content well, we can come in and then refer our students to particular chapters. Again, you'll see that there's this really nice connection to curriculum. So the students, first and foremost, are presented with pieces like learning objectives. They will understand, and particularly important in an online environment, what it is they can expect to learn during this time that they're here. And again, these function just like textbooks, like, you know, any kind of textbook one would purchase. They were created by teams of faculty that want to present a different view, have more authority, perhaps more diversity in what they're teaching, and then to make it freely available because this supports textbook affordability. There are large OER projects out there, some that, particularly in the community colleges realm, where we see freely available and open textbooks that support entire two-year degree programs. And we know, due to, you know, the data that's been run over the last few years, that this can save students thousands of dollars for just one degree, one two-year degree, by using these kinds of texts. So again, I would urge you to, you know, as you're thinking about textbooks every year and content for your classes, to really think about, you know, affordability and what using OER can help with, you know, for our students. Back to OpenStax, this is also a project that is highly adaptable. So for most of the texts, if you find a chapter that you love or a book that you love, but there are other pieces to it that, you know, you need to add or you need to change, you can actually go in and adapt. So you can take a chapter, pull it out, adapt that information, and then use that in your course shell. OpenStax has a lot of has done a lot of work with different LMSs. So typically this kind of content is built out already for Canvas, and there's all kinds of other, as it says, ancillary material available for both instructors and students. If you are interested in using any OpenStax material, you'll need a faculty logon, and they do vet whether you're a faculty member or not, because they don't want to, you know, give out tests and things like that and quizzes. Typically, it takes 4 to 5 days. So you would want to go ahead and ask for that faculty login, and then you would have access to all of the faculty materials behind each course. Again, this is mainly a gen ed, you know, a gen ed arena, but there's a lot of really great content in there for everyone. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. Just a couple of notables in terms of OER content. A lot of us have already heard about Khan Academy, so that is very much an OER project. It's also a massive online course project, or MOOC, but oftentimes Khan does connect to curriculum. It also hosts Smart History and a few of these other OER projects. So they have a lot of concern about creating curriculum, and they've done a lot of work actually lately in K-12. They have some pretty interesting stuff up for K-12. Lumen is another one. Lumen is its own project, standalone, that has course frameworks for different classes and provides online textbooks. It is fully open and tends to work with larger grant projects to create these kinds of classes, but it's a platform more than anything else with the content on it. And of course, the UNC Course Enhancement Project, which took place this summer, is pretty notable. This is a large project that came together, and I was lucky to be on the librarian team for this. But we brought together, looking at, you know, high impact courses. We brought together faculty from across the system and created frameworks for a number of classes, mainly within STEM and business this time, but we hope to do humanities in the near future. So that's coming. And these are fully fleshed out courses where one can go in, grab the class, get it into your Canvas, and make whatever adaptations you need to make, but you're pretty much ready to go. You have a really well, you know, well-conceived of, well-created class. And again, all of these include curriculum, teaching examples, content, quizzes, tests, and so much more. So we've talked a little bit about copyright and OER, and we looked at that CC BY license. We saw a little bit of what that looks like, but just to click here and quickly move out to show you what some of the other licenses look like. You'll know it when you see it. that's always how I feel about it, because it's we use a lot of different. So CC Creative Commons is just simply creativecommons.org. You can come here and watch videos about licensing and understand the different levels of licensing. But at the bottom of this page, we do have 6 standard licenses. And these really do let you know what your levels and your abilities to distribute, remix, adapt, build upon the work are, how you need to credit. As well, this is a great place for you to come. If you turn into the content provider, you're going to want to come here to the Creative Commons and determine what license works best for you. So, you know, do you want people to be able to use your content only in an educational setting? Do you want them to be able to remix it? Do you want them to, you know, attribute it to your work? You know, there are lots of different considerations when one is creating content and making it available to other faculty. So for instance, when I work with music grad students, we often talk about these licenses in terms of that whole idea of remix, but also whether it's available commercially or non-commercially. So many students want to be able to put their work out on YouTube, and I always tell them, make sure you've got some sort of strong CC license so that you have, you know, you have that space. All right. And so I did promise this. We've talked a lot about how things can fit into Canvas and how OER can, but many of the OERs we've looked at today do have underlying development that allows you to hook in. And so it'll have what's called a, you know, either, you know, content will be sitting out in modules, or it will have what's called a cartridge. Which allows one to just simply move it over from its from the site into Canvas or Moodle or Blackboard or whatever shell you're using. Now, I'm talking about this, I've never done this and I don't know how to do it. So I'm talking big here, but I know it can be done. My guess is that Wanda can help anybody do this that needs to, but I can certainly, you know, find out more information as well on how to pull that content into our local Canvas environment. So again, if you're moving outside of the realm of just using those static links, you know, to a chapter or a page or a video, and you really do, you do find a course that you really want to move into your entire Canvas shell, reach out. You can start with Wanda, but you can talk to me too, and we'll make sure that that can happen for you. But the nice thing again is that all of the content is sort of pre-packaged, and it gives you something to start with. You can always go back in and adapt it, but it gives you that starting place. And last thoughts, and we've already talked about this as well, but the difference between OER and MOOC. And again, that kind of comes up with Khan Academy and some other projects out there, but really there's not a ton of difference in the content itself, in the rights attributions and the kinds of learning experiences that one will find in those places. It's mainly the differences in intent. So OER really is there for that curricular, that really tight curricular tie-in, providing flexibility for faculty, affordability for students. But a MOOC is really, you know, I mean, it's the beginning of the acronym is massive. Massive online something course. So basically a MOOC is one of those classes like one might find in a place like Coursera. If you haven't been to Coursera, that's a great place to go to learn about a lot of different topics. But typically, a MOOC is created by a faculty member at a campus. It sits alongside a class that they're teaching at the same time on their campus, and it can provide course content to 100,000 people at once. I mean, it's a crazy huge online course. Now, is the faculty member grading 100,000 students? No. No, it's just that the content's available to them. They can move through and they can do the learning and it's available to them. But again, MOOCs are a great place. If you go into Coursera and other places, you may find those facets of content that you want to integrate into your own classes. So it's certainly, particularly if it is in those kinds of modules and it is asynchronous, it's a great place to find information as well. All right, do we have any questions? No? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, and nobody is unmuting themselves. So I think, oh, can you talk about Europeana? Audiobooks. Okay, so two good questions. So audiobooks just depends on the site. I have found there aren't as many audiobooks out there. There are some. And we actually do have some audiobooks available to us through NC Live, through vendors, but we do find that that's typically something that the library has to subscribe to make those available. And I would have loved to have done that this year, and I'm not sure we'll be able to through a company called Overdrive. Europeana, let's jump over to that real quick. Get back out to Chrome. Make sure I spelled it correctly. There we go. Europeana and the Digital Public Library of America, again, are these aggregators that kind of sit on top of lots and lots of different museums and cultural organizations that push their open content out there. So it's a really great cultural heritage site where one can come in and run a search across millions of items, you know, at once. So let's see, what's a good, I'm just gonna search for, I'm gonna be very basic. Let's just search for Manet. There we go. And immediately we come up with 231 results. And these are typically images. So we see that there are, you know, many prints here. Some are coming in from, you know, different museums from Germany, from Slovak, the Slovak National Gallery, and a number of different organizations. So once you click on these images, and again, there's a lot, so we can keep, you know, filtering through. There's catalogs and different pieces. Once you click in here, that will take you to content in a, you know, at a different place. So we can view the image. There we go. And we can do these kinds of functionalities, zooming in, that sort of thing. So it's just a really, again, it's a phenomenal rabbit hole. If you want to take some time and play into Europeana, you will find a lot of really amazing cultural information. I believe it's actually directly supported by the EU. And Europe typically has much more restrictive copyright around images and art images. So, you know, there necessarily needed to be a European project and an American project, I think, to deal with some of those. Anson says, LibriVox.org has audiobooks if you're up for amateur readers and non-copyright old texts. Okay, that's cool. So that must be like, I guess, volunteers. Oh, good. Kim's also put the link to the audiobooks that we have through NC Live. But I guess volunteers doing reading probably of content in the public domain. Audiobooks is still big business, as are ebooks. So we really, it's going to be, you know, public domain content, you know, all around. The one thing, of course, that can change that is that if the individual authors, as they're publishing, or if they self-publish, and then they can make those pieces available themselves. Okay, any other questions? Well, thanks everybody for coming today. Please feel free to email me if you have any further questions or you have specific content needs. We can do some deep dives and find what you need. This recording will be placed on the library website with all of our other webinar recordings. And yeah, go open, go open. Yeah. All right, thank you so much.